Many factors in our environment have the ability to change our perspective and the ways we communicate. These factors include age, physical ability and disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, diversity, culture, and gender.
Do you speak English?
Intérprete, por favor.
I speak English.
Tôi cần bác sĩ á, có ai mà nói tiếng Việt không?
Wrong number.
Việt Nam á.
Your hospital, and you don't speak German.
I'm gonna hang up because I don't know what else to say. I don't know if you can understand if I say bye. If I say bye?
Một phê đi.
Diverse populations are in need of services that can accommodate language barriers. These services can include on-site translators or informational pamphlets printed in different languages. A lack of these services can result in poor patient satisfaction, limited doctor-patient interaction, and poor quality of healthcare received. When the language of communication of a certain individual differs from the language of communications in society, it has the ability to impact self-concept. Either the person will choose to adapt to the most dominant language, or they believe that they must preserve their mother tongue. Culture is another aspect that impacts communication. Communication is a reflection of culture. It impacts one's ability to communicate directly, assertively, or with apprehension. Collectivist cultures such as in Asian countries have a stronger belief in supporting in-groups. There is limited emphasis on individualism and more of an emphasis on group well-being. People from this culture highly value family, tradition, age, and group security. Assertive communication can be deemed as being highly disrespectful. For example, making eye contact with a superior is deemed inappropriate. Western, Australian, and European cultures highly believe in individualism and therefore are called individualistic cultures. Each individual is a separate entity from the group and is responsible for self. Assertiveness and direct communication is highly awarded in these cultures. Culturally competent healthcare allows healthcare professionals to adapt to the cultural needs of patients and help to better serve them.
Changing your self-concept. One of the first steps is to have a realistic expectation of the situation and of yourself. So it is important to recognize expectations as well as evaluate them. An example of having unrealistic expectations in the healthcare field is oftentimes we see in hospitals when loved ones or family members or whoever are admitted and their family and friends come in, they have unrealistic expectations of the service that is to be provided for their particular loved one or family member. They feel that they should have a lot more service than they actually get. Having a realistic perception is also very important, as poor perception can be a source of poor self-concept. And this picture illustrates that quite well, as a little kitten is looking into a mirror and perceiving himself to be a lion, and obviously that's not the case. An example of this in the healthcare field is when one denies a disease either in himself or in a loved one. And another example is when elite athletes get injured, they have unrealistic goals as to the amount of time it will take for them to heal and get better. So they will push themselves, not giving themselves enough time to fully heal. One of the hardest steps is to have the will to change and to not assume that you just cannot do it, but making an effort to identify the misconception and plan and think through the alternatives that will lead to change. Lastly, it is important to have the skill to change, as sometimes trying alone is not enough to make the change. Observing others is a very good idea, as you can observe your weakness in perhaps someone else and see how they deal with it. If your weakness is speaking, observe how other people interact, etc. Lastly, we will talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, and this refers to the notion of making predictions about future behaviors of feelings and then acting according to those predictions. An example of this is an athlete motivating himself to make a positive prediction about his success in a particular game situation, like a pep talk before the game. There are two types of self-fulfilling prophecies. A self-imposed prophecy is one's own expectation influence one's own behavior. In other words, if you believe you can do it, you can do it, and if you don't believe you can do it, you won't be able to do it. The other type is other imposed prophecies, meaning that your actions will be governed by the expectations that others have of you. Positive and negative feedback can influence a person's train of thought and how they think or act. So an example of this is positive feedback can influence a person to think positively, whereas negative feedback can do the opposite. Oftentimes, an observer's belief is not the only thing that can shape the prophecy for a target individual. It is how that belief is communicated. These communications can be strong or weak, either making or breaking a relationship. It is also important to note not to confuse a good prediction with a self-fulfilling prophecy. To sum it all up, to a large extent we shape ourselves according to what we believe about ourselves and what others believe about us.